So as I'm turning the engine over, look for that tensioner to kind of come out. Right there. Okay, so now this part of the chain is tight. We can see that's our problem right there. The tensioner is just worn out. It's fed by oil pressure. So when the oil gets really hot, less viscous, the tensioner just can't keep up with the chain of with the tension of the chain, and it just kind of free floats there. So we're changing the right part. I also noticed that this guide up here, this plastic guide, is kind of loose on its bolts. I don't know if that's, if the bolts are loose or what, but we're definitely changing that out as well. Well, the bolts are tight, so maybe that's just the way it is. So that's the deal. So I guess it's just bolt it off, bolt it on, we'll be good to go. So it looks like these guides are actually by design meant to be kind of floating. I mean, man, that seems really chintzy for a for such a critical component. Let's see, I have the slack on this side of the chain now, and this guy's just loose. So is that one. So I don't know. They lasted this long. I'll put new ones on. Hopefully they'll last just as long. And then once we get the guides changed out, then we'll need to get something to temporarily tension this while we change the tensioner out. So now we're going to change out this lower guide right here. Loosen up the bolts. Now this you want to do by hand, or at least start them by hand. And make sure you cover up your oil pan chasm there with a paper towel so you don't make more work for yourself, right? Let's get these guys out. So see, the bolts look like they're shouldered, so you can't crush the plastic chain guide. So it looks like they are meant to kind of float around on there. All happy and free. So let's check this one for wear. I'm curious how, 130,000 miles, if they actually wore the guide down any. And if you look down, I mean, yeah, you can see the where the chain rides, but it doesn't look like the grooves are all that deep or anything. Let's see. See if the grooves are, if I can feel them with a pick. Yeah, just a little bit, but man, whatever plastic this is, that's pretty amazing that it survives in this harsh environment with the chain riding on it all the time under tension. Pretty impressive. Now, also keep in mind that, see, right now this chain is loose. Don't turn anything. You don't want to jump the timing here, because resetting the timing on this thing, it's a whole nother can of worms. So we're just want to be in and out real quick. No, no extra work. So let's put the new one in. So identical from Suzuki, even has the same number on there. It says PA66, same stamp. Now it's curious to look, there's a date stamp on each one of these guides. So if you look at the new one, see if we can focus in here. That little date stamp, it says, see, it says 02, and it's pointing to the number 3. So I think that's March of 2002. was the date of manufacture. The new one, it says, let's see, the arrow is pointing this way. It says 13, and it's pointing to Z, so that's December 2013. Well, that's pretty cool. So hopefully these new guides aren't any less quality, you know, they're built later. But we'll put it in and hope for the best. So now we're changing out the upper guide, and on a forum post, the guy was complaining of a really loud noise, and he got the timing cover off, and this plastic was just grenaded and like all over his engine. So they can break. Now I don't know if that was from excessive chain slap because the tensioner went out or what, but better safe than sorry, right? Plastic has a limited lifespan. I mean, we can do a test, kind of squeeze this thing, see if it breaks. Still seems pretty pliable. Get these new one in there, then we'll go for the real tensioner. So this one actually says 4. It says 14 is pointing to 4, so that's an even more recent one, April 2014. That's cool. Let's put this guy back in. Now the torque spec on these, I'll look it up for you, but little nuts and bolts like this, I just kind of use your head. Don't be Captain Overtight. You're bolting it into an aluminum body, so just use a little, 1-foot ratchet and just kind of snug it, and then go a little bit further and you're good. No Loctite required. A little bit further and you're good. So see, these float around a little bit like the old ones did. Alright, let's go for the tensioner. So now we want to turn the engine over a little bit so we get our slack by the tensioner. Now every time you take this pulley on and off, keep in mind there's a little key that keeps it aligned to the crankshaft, and that key, I think, can fall out. So be careful when you're taking it on and off. Alright, so tension here, slack at the tensioner, it's great. So now we have to think of a method to hold this tensioner, tight, and then we can safely unbolt our adjuster there. So let me come up with something real quick. Alright, so here's my little makeshift holder for that guide. Just a pry bar, block of wood. Make sure it's sturdy. It's not going to go anywhere, and you can actually now manipulate the tensioner with your finger. And we'll undo these 2 bolts, pop it off, and put the new one on. So it's just 2 10mm bolts here. Now when you say 10mm bolt, technically these are what, M5 or M6, but the socket is 10mm. So that's one. Now the tensioner will actually automatically extend under spring pressure here. Don't worry about that too much. Oh, here it is. So here's the tensioner, or they call it the adjuster. So it has a ratchet clip right here, plus oil pressure behind it. So we can see there's oil in there. So what the oil does is it pushes it out, and then once it gets to a ratchet, to one of the pawls, or to one of the cutouts, it'll kind of stay there, so it'll have some give, but it takes quite a bit to go to the next one. Right there, see? So it's kind of obviously, so the chain doesn't lose all of its tension. It has like a safety, but during operation, the chain heats up, it stretches. So this is what accounts for that stretch, to keep the chain under constant tension with the oil pressure. So in our case, the ratchet still looks good, but this thing, I guess somewhere in there, the tolerances aren't as good as they used to be. See, there's a little oil feed hole, so you can see how small that is. So it's very key to use good oil and change it often on these cars with all these really delicate hydraulic components. So let's compare it to the new one and bolt it on. Now coming over here to the bench, let's compare the old and the new. I'm just curious how they work, what the specifications are, So one point to keep in mind is, do we just replace the tensioner or all the timing components, or what? I've read that if your tensioner is more than 4 to 6 clicks out, that means the chain is too stretched and you need to replace all your timing components. So on here, if you take a close look at the actual piston, we can see where it's kind of shiny and clear, and then it's more brown here. So that was the travel as it operated in the engine. So let's count how many clicks that was. So we're fully compressed. Now we're backing up. 1, 2, 3. So we were at 3 clicks out. See, that was the range there. Maximum of 4. So we're still within specification on our chain length. And this thing can go to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 clicks, fully extended. Okay, let's get our new one. I don't know when this thing was made. I don't know if it has a timestamp on it. It's wrapped in this moisture protectant. It says place opposite side against metal. Do not unwrap until ready for use. Okay. So comparing oil holes in the same place. And it comes with this little lock tab that we can pull out and it'll extend. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Just like the old one did. Now, I'm really curious to take the old one apart and see why the oil pressure wouldn't extend the piston. I mean, this one doesn't feel any like the piston and the bore. I don't know if there's any more play in there or what. Put that back in. I mean, it's really hard to tell. So if the oil comes in here, it just pushes on the backside of the piston and then it just kind of dribbles out wherever. But yeah, there's not much to it. I don't see a way to take it apart. maybe pop that pin out on the ratchet and the whole thing just flies out. Maybe we'll do that in the post analysis video, but let's put this thing back together, bolt the new tensioner on. Cross our fingers, right? So bolting the new tensioner back on, obviously you have to make sure that this mating surface is clean, and so is the new tensioner. So already did that. Let's put our bolts in here. That guy sits right in there. Wouldn't it be nice if they had a little access cover on the main timing cover for this guy? My 1989 MPV, Mazda MPV, also has a timing chain set up, but they were actually smart enough to make a little access panel for that tensioner, and at 240,000 miles that tensioner is still working fine. So just goes to show you that technological progress doesn't necessarily mean things are going to last longer. Sometimes it means the opposite. So now again, we're going to go with our mechanic's touch. I had a friend who was in grad school, and now he works at NASA, and he was changing the spark plugs on his older Saab 9.3, and I told him, you know, torque them so the crush ring gets crushed, whatever, 18 foot-pounds, nothing crazy. So he goes out, buys a torque wrench, like a big old torque wrench, starts torquing his plugs, and apparently he didn't feel the little click, so he just keeps going, snap, the plug breaks off inside of his cylinder head, and well, luckily he got it out. But talk about trusting something and not using your head. That's what usually happens. Stuff breaks. So I'd rather stick to my feel than torque every little bolt here to spec. Obviously when it comes to heads, head bolts, stuff like that, yeah, definitely use your torque wrench, but for smaller stuff, it's not always necessary. It can lead to problems. So what we're going to do here is take out our grenade pin. See the tensioner extended. I'm going to take out our block and our pry bar. Now just check how far that tensioner moves in and out. And that's going to do that until it actually fills up with oil. Make sure the chain is tight everywhere else, so it's, it extended, I guess, one click. I mean, we could push it all the way in. And count. 1, 2, 3. That's it. 3 clicks. Looks good. Chain's tight everywhere else. So once the engine starts, that should pressurize, fill up with oil, and be good to go. Now we just have to put everything back together here. It's going to be a fun time RTVing that cover back on, and hoping we don't have any oil leaks, but that's what you got to do. So before buttoning this beast back up, let's just make sure that we're not overlooking anything. Is there anything else we need to do here, or that we should do here before reassembling to, I guess, while we're here? Because you don't want to do this job a month down the road if something else goes wrong. One thing that I kind of was looking at is this chain for the oil pump. This is the oil pump right here. As you can see, is that too much free play, or is that by design? So let's look in the shop manual and see how this chain is tensioned. Well, it's obvious how it's tensioned. There's just this manual tensioner here. See how it's cut out, so you can loosen up these bolts and tension this chain, but sometimes they give a spec of like, you know, that should move a centimeter at the loosest point. So let's take a look at the shop manual here for the oil pump chain, and it says to take up slack of oil pump chain, push center of oil pump chain guide with a force of 50 to 60 grams, so 1/10 of a pound. So you just basically push it with your finger a little bit, and tighten the oil pump chain guide bolts to specified torque. So basically there isn't supposed to be any, you know, huge play in here. You actually push down on that, you know, on the arrow, and tighten these bolts down. So let's do that before proceeding with the sealing up the timing cover. So let's tension that chain for the oil pump. So we have to loosen these two bolts right here, no big deal. Push. See how much that chain took up the slack there? Now, first I'll tighten the top bolt, which has that elongated cutout in the guide. Check your chain tension. You'll see that basically took all the slack out of it. And I just lightly pushed on there. Tighten these guys down. Alright. Now we can reseal the cover.